Welcome to the Deep Dives, where we take a stack of information, sift through it, and pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge to help you become well-informed quickly. Today we're plunging into a topic that, well, it often whispers from the shadows of history, doesn't it? And then it pops up in modern headlines too. We're talking about the intricate and often surprising connections between occult practices, esoteric traditions, and those in positions of power. We've gathered a fascinating array of materials that explore everything from, ancient rituals all the way up to modern political figures and the various societies that seem to weave through it all.
It is a really compelling subject, I think, because it touches on such fundamental human desires. Things like control, understanding, and influence, not just over the world we see, but maybe unseen aspects too. So what we'll explore today is how these deeper, often veiled elements, what we might call occult practices in their truest sense, meaning concealed or obscure, how they've reportedly intersected with governance, with conflict, and really the structures of society throughout history. We'll look at the historical roots of these connections, their alleged impact on significant events, and how they continue to manifest in, frankly, quite unexpected ways. It prompts us to consider perhaps the full spectrum of influences on our world.
Right. So let's unpack this together and maybe illuminate some of these intriguing concealed connections for you. First off, I think it's really vital to establish what we mean when we use terms like occult or esoteric, because it's easy to jump to conclusions. It's not just about, the supernatural or things that go bump in the night necessarily. It's often more broadly about knowledge that is hidden, obscured, or concealed from general view. It's like a dimension of understanding that isn't immediately obvious to everyone.
Exactly. And the word esoteric itself really points to that. Its etymology takes us to the inner side of things, knowledge that's secret or revealed only to a select few, maybe initiates. Our sources tell us this concept goes way back, at least to the 2nd century CE. You have figures like Lucian of Samosata defining esoteric as something seen from within, which suggests, an internal or privileged perspective. And Clement of Alexandria, he connected it to doctrines sort of buried within myths, things not immediately apparent unless you had the key, so to speak. So there's this long-standing tradition of knowledge being deliberately withheld or perhaps transmitted only through specific channels. It creates this divide between public knowledge and, private understanding.
Okay, so it's knowledge not meant for everyone. Maybe for various reasons it could be seen as too complex, maybe too dangerous, or simply reserved for a chosen few. And that ties in quite naturally, doesn't it, to the whole idea of secret societies. As our materials point out, these groups, they often don't hide their existence. We know they're there, but they meticulously guard their internal workings, their rituals, their true beliefs, maybe their ultimate goals. This guardedness seems fundamental to how certain practices and influences might operate away from public scrutiny.
And a key aspect here, something that gives these organizations a powerful appeal, is the promise they offer. Special knowledge, perhaps elevated status, or even unique power for those who are initiated. Think about the Freemasons. It's a widely known society, millions of members globally. But they often prefer to be called a society with secrets rather than a secret society.
That's an interesting distinction.
It is. It's not just playing with words. It underlines a deliberate control over who knows what. Their rituals, their oaths, certain philosophical aspects, those are reserved for members. And that definitely contributes to their mystique and, their perceived influence, both historically and today.
And the popularity of this whole idea, hidden realities, clandestine networks, it's everywhere in culture. Books, films. You mentioned Umberto Eco, Dan Brown. There's this fascination, this idea of grand hidden agendas, maybe groups like the Illuminati, subtly pulling the strings behind world events.
Right, it's a persistent trope.
But it's important to be careful, as one source cautions. While there's clearly a historical overlap between esotericism and concealment, they're not exactly the same thing. Not every secret is esoteric, right? And not all esotericism is kept secret purely for power. Sometimes it's about personal growth or protecting sensitive knowledge.
That's a very fair point.
Yeah.
However, it is also undeniably worth noting that cultural norms and deeply held beliefs, including those around symbolic power, like, say, witchcraft, these can be deliberately used, instrumentalized by those in authority. Used to manipulate public opinion, perhaps, or legitimize the status quo.
How so?
Well, this suggests a conscious application of these veiled elements to maintain authority. Here, the occult isn't just hidden knowledge anymore. It becomes a potentially potent tool for social and political control. And its real function is often subtly woven into the fabric of society, not explicitly declared. It goes beyond just privacy of membership to the active deployment of belief systems for potentially tangible political ends.
Okay, let's step back in time then. Let's look at some specific historical figures, people in power, who reportedly engaged with these kinds of practices. Because it seems like more than just isolated incidents. You see this pattern across centuries, sometimes kept very quiet, sometimes revealed only in specific ways.
Yes, you definitely see early examples in European royalty. It's quite intriguing how the pursuit of power often mingled with attempts to understand or maybe influence unseen forces. Queen Elizabeth I, for instance. She had a known interest in astrology, apparently consulting charts for guidance on state matters.
Right, that's fairly well documented.
But her advisor, John Dee, he went much, much deeper. He genuinely believed he could communicate directly with angels. He used mediums, scrying mirrors, crystals, trying to receive what he saw as divine revelations.
That sounds more intense.
It was, and while Dee's practices were known in certain circles, they certainly weren't common knowledge. And his influence dropped sharply when James I took the throne. James notoriously hated the occult. He even published a whole book against it, Demonology, in 1599, condemning witchcraft. So you see this shift, sometimes leading to these practices being suppressed or pushed further into the shadows.
Fascinating. Then if we jump forward to the Victorian era, Queen Victoria herself was reportedly interested in spiritualism. And this was a time, wasn't it, when women, often constrained by society, found a surprising kind of autonomy and power within that spiritualist movement. Through mediumship, they could offer services, hold seances in their own homes, even gain financial independence.
Absolutely. The Victorian spiritualist movement offered a really unique space for women. Paradoxically, their perceived fragile or sensitive nature was believed to make them more open to trances and supernatural communication. So a supposed weakness became a source of authority.
Interesting twist.
Yes, mediums, who were mostly women, became quite central figures in London's occult societies at the time. Seances, where they tried to connect with the beyond, were the main events. It represented a form of power, perhaps misunderstood or dismissed by mainstream society, but it definitely existed. It operated in this sort of veiled sphere, subverting traditional norms.
Okay, moving into the early 20th century, a very turbulent time. Russia, Grigory Rasputin. An incredibly enigmatic figure who rose to prominence under Tsar Nicholas II. His influence was deeply resented, wasn't it? Lots of accusations of shady dealings within the royal family.
Oh, deeply. Rasputin, a self-proclaimed mystic, undeniably controversial. He reportedly gained his incredible influence by performing what were seen as healings for the Tsar's son, Alexei, who had hemophilia. This brought him incredibly close to the imperial family. But his methods weren't exactly transparent.
I imagine not.
Which fostered huge suspicion. He was widely accused of being a religious heretic, a manipulative charlatan. People resented his sway over the Tsar's government. There were even accusations, serious ones, that he was tangled up with the Empress Alexandra in a secret plot.
A plot.
Allegedly, to arrange a separate peace with Berlin during the war, possibly facilitated by contact with a secretive group called the Greens in Stockholm. The whole story just screams hidden actors, covert agendas operating right at the top, trying to manipulate huge events.
And it's not just historical figures, is it? Our materials also point to more contemporary examples.
Yeah.
People in power, even modern royalty, engaging with esoteric or occult practices. It shows this intersection isn't just a relic of the past. It continues, sometimes openly, sometimes more discreetly.
Indeed. Princess Martha Louise of Norway, who's currently fourth in line to the throne, actually makes a living as a clairvoyant. Openly. She stepped back from official royal duties in 2002, gave up her Royal Highness title and allowance specifically to pursue this career. She teaches clients how to talk to angels, communicate with the dead. She even ran an angel school.
Wow.
It's a striking modern example of royalty explicitly embracing practices once considered purely occult, though in her case it's quite public, which contrasts with some historical patterns of concealment within state structures.
And politically.
Yeah.
Our sources mention figures like the former Venezuelan president Hugo Chavez. He apparently integrated Santeria into his political strategy, seeking counsel from santeros, spiritual practitioners, during national crises, attributing his resilience to ritual protections.
That's what's reported, yes. Santeria is an Afro-Cuban religion, blending Yoruba beliefs and Catholicism. Chavez was said to consult practitioners, especially during challenging times, and openly linked his political survival and personal strength to these ritual protections. It suggests a strategic, if perhaps not always publicly detailed, incorporation of spiritual practices into high-stakes politics, believing, or at least projecting the belief, that unseen forces were aiding his rule.
Even in, say, modern U.S. politics, the sources mention claims, though often framed as rumor or public discourse rather than proven fact. Things like alleged photos of a former president at a party interpreted esoterically, or a former Secretary of State referencing mythology in an email.
Exactly. And whether these specific claims are factually accurate or not is almost secondary to the point that they become part of the narrative. It shows how easily these stories circulate and fuel theories about hidden influences. It affects public perception of power, regardless of whether there's any deliberate concealment by officials or not. The idea itself has power.
Okay, so let's shift focus slightly. Beyond individuals, these practices seem to play a documented role in broader societal dynamics, especially, it seems, in times of conflict and as methods of control. Here, the idea of practices operating behind the scenes takes on a more strategic, sometimes quite grim dimension.
Yes, absolutely. In many parts of Africa, for instance, belief in supernatural powers, in witchcraft, isn't marginal at all. It's deeply embedded in daily life, and it affects political and economic processes, too. It's reported that both Islamic leaders and Pentecostal churches have sometimes instrumentalized these beliefs.
How do you mean instrumentalize?
Well, either to subjugate people, perhaps by demonizing traditional pagan ideas, or conversely, to strengthen their own legitimacy by integrating those same ideas into their frameworks to connect with local populations. It represents a deliberate, though often culturally ingrained, use of these powerful belief systems to maintain authority and control. It acts as a potent, though maybe obscured, form of power within society.
And this can even extend right into legal systems. You mentioned the struggle for the control of witchcraft being seen as a core political issue in some places. The idea that if the state can effectively manage or check witchcraft, it boosts its own legitimacy. Like in South Africa, acknowledging the belief but legislating against harm.
Precisely. The South African example is quite clear. The government acknowledges witchcraft belief as part of culture, but it also creates laws against harmful practices associated with it, like witch hunts. It's the state trying to manage and integrate this deeply held, often privately practiced belief system into its formal structures for governance and social order. And historically, groups like the African National Congress reportedly use these belief systems themselves to promote their agendas, tapping into that cultural resonance. Later, you see politically motivated witchcraft accusations distinct from, say, ritual murder claims being used strategically, used to fight opponents or endorse the legitimacy of young activists.
So it becomes a political weapon.
It can be, yes, a veiled tool in broader political struggles where the occult is integrated into the strategy.
And the impact can be truly devastating, as the sources highlight with human trafficking victims, coerced through witchcraft, voodoo, juju, exploiting their beliefs.
It's horrific. Traffickers capitalize on deeply held superstitious beliefs, often combined with the victim's isolation and ignorance of the outside world. There are reports of branding victims with cuts filled with ashes to seal oaths, creating this paralyzing fear of supernatural punishment if they disobey or escape.
That's terrifying.
It is. And some of the most extreme cases involve individuals with albinism being hunted and sold to witch doctors. Their body parts are believed to hold potent magic for charms meant to bring wealth or power. These are stark examples of how these hidden, culturally ingrained practices can be weaponized for terrible crimes, maintaining control through the fear of unseen supernatural consequences.
Switching continents in Colombia, esoteric practices were apparently militarized, used strategically by different armed groups.
Yes, our sources detail this. It wasn't just superstition, it was tactical. Guerrilla groups reportedly used things like herbal baths for protection. Paramilitaries carried patikins, protective amulets, and underwent initiation rituals seeking divine favor, even invincibility.
Invincibility.
That was the belief, or the hope. The point is, it wasn't just folklore. It was integrated into strategy. It influenced tactical decisions, helped mobilize troops, boosted morale, and was used in psychological warfare. The true nature of these practices as strategic assets might well have been obscured from outsiders.
And this isn't unique to Colombia, is it? You see similar patterns elsewhere. Liberian commanders using magical bulletproofing. Mozambican guerrillas trying to turn bullets into water through ritual.
Exactly. It's a recurring theme globally. Commanders in the Liberian Civil War using rituals believed to make fighters impervious to bullets. Renamo guerrillas in Mozambique employing traditional healers for rituals intended to neutralize enemy weapons. Whether these things worked empirically isn't the point. The belief reportedly enhanced confidence on the battlefield, fostered a sense of invulnerability, and crucially strengthened group cohesion under extreme stress. It shows this consistent instrumentalization of esoteric beliefs for practical military goals, often using practices kept secret from the enemy and perhaps even from some within their own ranks.
The study of what's called esoteropolitics in Colombia also reveals something interesting about visibility versus concealment. Practitioners might be seen as charlatans in some areas, but as respected guides in elite circles.
Yes, it's a fascinating paradox. In more marginal or rural areas, someone practicing esoteric arts might be dismissed as a fraud. But in elite urban settings, similar practitioners might be viewed as respected teachers or spiritual advisors. This suggests that occult influence operates differently depending on the social context. It's often camouflaged or integrated subtly into everyday life, especially among elites. And this really challenges the ideals of, say, liberal democracy, where transparency is supposed to be key. It allows significant influence to be exerted through channels that aren't easily seen or subject to public debate, remaining largely hidden from broader view.
Which brings us back squarely to secret societies. The connection between occultism and power often seems to manifest most clearly through these groups. They've existed throughout history, attracting brilliant minds, sometimes destructive ones, and they often become focal points for myths and conspiracy theories precisely because they operate with some level of secrecy.
Absolutely. Think of the legendary assassins, supposedly controlling an invisible empire through their master, Hassani Abba. Or the Knights Templar, that powerful medieval order accused of secret rituals, even worshipping an idol called Baphomet. Secrecy is the common thread.
And the Templars, even after being formally disbanded, some theories suggest they continued in secret, maybe influencing events like the French Revolution.
That's one persistent theory, yes. The allegations against them, especially about the secrecy of proceedings in their initiations, highlight this enduring concern about concealed practices and the potential power wielded from the shadows.
Closer to home, the American Revolution. It's reported there was a disproportionate number of Freemasons among the founders and officers. Some people point to symbols like the Eye of Providence on the Great Seal as evidence of a hidden Masonic agenda.
That interpretation is certainly out there. The all-seeing eye on the unfinished pyramid is a potent symbol. And you also have groups like the Rosicrucians with their esoteric roots using Egyptian imagery. They sought universal spiritual enlightenment, led by an initiated elite, and even prophesied a revolution to build a new world. These are compelling examples where symbols and affiliations are read as signs of a deeper, hidden plan for societal change.
Fast forward again, 20th century, the Russian Revolution. Figures like Trotsky, claims of ties to arch-conspirators, subterranean groups influencing the Bolsheviks, and their aim for a new world order.
Yes, those narratives exist in our source materials. They suggest that beneath the surface of the revolution there might have been hidden networks, possibly with esoteric agendas, working to shape events and establish a radical new global system. It feeds into that idea of history being driven by forces we don't readily see.
And then there's the potent association of Nazism with occultism, which has really thrived in popular culture since the 40s. Though some studies emphasize more mundane reasons for Nazi support, claims persist about Hitler's alleged demonic possession or links to figures like Aleister Crowley or groups like the Thule Society.
Right. The Thule Society definitely influenced early Nazi propaganda with its esoteric ideas. And doctrines like Ariosophy, this mix of esoteric beliefs and Aryan racial nationalism, certainly shaped some of the early Nazi ideologues. It promoted ideas of an initiated elite and a spiritual destiny for the German people. So whether or not Hitler himself was deeply involved in occult practices, these esoteric narratives undeniably became intertwined with the movement, fueling perceptions of dark, hidden forces at play.
These ideas of secret governments don't stop there, do they? Italy's P2 Lodge is mentioned linked to Freemasonry, fascism, secret armies, financial crime.
P2 is a stark example, a clandestine lodge implicated in major political and financial scandals in Italy. It was widely seen as a mechanism to hide an alliance between powerful political factions, Christian Democrats, socialists, fascists, united primarily to keep the communists out of power. It demonstrates a clear case where a supposedly secret society was allegedly operating to manipulate the political landscape, intentionally concealing alliances and operations from the public.
And another group often mentioned in these contexts is the Bilderberg Group. Very secretive meetings, described by some as just an advisory body, but by others as something more. Synarchy. a shadowy movement aiming for global authoritarianism.
Yes, the interpretations of Bilderberg vary wildly. But the concept of synarchy, as described in our sources, is rooted in secret societies and occult doctrines. It's accused of aiming to create chaos deliberately, to facilitate revolution and replace existing governments with a global authoritarian structure run by a technocratic elite and, quote, spiritual snake oil salesmen.
It's quite a charge.
It is. There were even specific accusations of economic sabotage in France before World War II, allegedly orchestrated by synarchist groups to weaken the state. It points to this ambition to reshape the world through hidden, esoteric, influenced means.
It even touches the world of intelligence agencies, apparently, equating the pursuit of occult knowledge with secret service work. Figures like Aleister Crowley reportedly working as an agent.
Crowley is a fascinating case, a key figure in Western occultism, member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. He reportedly did work for British intelligence, maybe as an agent provocateur influencing German propaganda in World War I. He even claimed his personal motto, "Do what thou wilt," aligned perfectly with espionage's, let's say, flexible moral code.
Huh. That's quite a justification.
It suggests a direct application of occultist thinking to covert operations, a field that inherently relies on secrecy and deception. Crowley himself cobbled together his mystical experiences into this religion he called Thelema, or will, dreaming it would start a new age. He was initiated by Samuel MacGregor Mathers, who, along with other Golden Dawn members, was reportedly involved in a conspiracy to arm a revolution in Spain. So you see these layers, personal spiritual quests, allegedly intertwining with concrete political and even military plots, all shielded by secrecy.
And we should also mention Helena Blavatsky. Russian-born, blended Western occultism with Eastern religions to create Theosophy. Established the Theosophical Society in New York in 1875, claiming to channel ascended masters.
Yes, Blavatsky was hugely influential. Theosophy aimed for spiritual enlightenment, drawing on ancient wisdom. She claimed her powers as a medium allowed her to channel these hidden masters. Establishing this global society based on channeling powerful, unseen beings is another example of esoteric knowledge and hidden powers being presented as guiding forces, with access granted to a select few.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, a lot of history, a lot of claims, which brings us to the why. Why do these beliefs about occult practices and power persist so strongly? What are the deep psychological, maybe societal drivers behind turning to or believing in these hidden forces?
Well, our materials suggest a few key things. Often people turn to occult or mystical practices when they're looking for answers or progress, especially after conventional methods seem to have failed. This could be quite practical, seeking financial success, for instance. Some practitioners claim success using things like feng shui or planetary magic for prosperity. Or it could be more profound, seeking spiritual growth, which many occult traditions describe as the only real treasure. So it often stems from this basic human need for effective solutions when the usual paths don't seem to work.
And it also ties into that deep need for meaning, for making sense of things, right? Especially complex or scary events in society. It provides a way to see some kind of supernatural order in chaos, maybe. Makes you feel like things aren't just random chance.
Exactly. It offers a framework for understanding a world that can often feel chaotic or threatening. The idea that there are hidden forces at play, whether good or bad, can paradoxically provide comfort by suggesting there's a plan, a structure, even if it's concealed. It reaffirms a sense of cosmic significance. And the core goal in many Western esoteric traditions is often called the great work.
The great work.
Yes, it's this ambitious path towards enlightenment or divine union or self-actualization. The ultimate aim is often described as becoming something more than human, transcending limitations. It's a journey of self-discovery, finding your true purpose, developing new insights, maybe even abilities. It's about influencing the universe through inner change, inner alchemy. And it requires, interestingly, a lack of fear towards death and transformation.
There's also that idea we touched on earlier, these hidden powers versus the visible, formal authority. Official structures exist, laws, governments. But real power might operate differently. Informally, through networks, influence, membership in elite or secret groups.
That's a key perception, that while formal structures are there, the real levers of power might be pulled through less visible means, informal networks, subtle influence, membership in exclusive clubs or societies that operate with discretion. It suggests that even when things look transparent on the surface, underlying hidden dynamics might be more decisive. Which raises the question, how much is governed by the visible versus the discrete?
And the way people approach spirituality today also plays a role. More individualism, exploring different paths, social media making magic seem more accessible.
Yes, definitely. The rise of individualism in religion, especially in the West, means more people are crafting their own spiritual paths outside traditional institutions. And social media has undeniably increased the visibility and perhaps the casualness around magic and occult ideas. It's easier than ever to find information communities. But this can also lead to a kind of commodification, where spiritual practice gets tangled up with producing content or selling services. Mastery might sometimes get confused with simply having a product or monetizing an interest, potentially overshadowing the deeper, traditionally guarded aspects of esoteric practice.
So ultimately, the fact that these stories, these practices persist, it reflects something fundamental about how humans engage with the unknown, doesn't it? Whether it's ancient healing rituals, protective amulets in war, or the alleged influence of secret societies on politics.
I think that's right. It's about this enduring human engagement with what's hidden, what's mysterious, what might offer an edge or deeper understanding. And the academic study of esotericism, which is growing, tries to understand these things seriously, to correct historical biases that just dismissed it all as superstition. It treats these currents as important dimensions of culture, asking how cultural beliefs and ideas about spiritual authority can genuinely influence political and even military landscapes, even when their operation isn't immediately obvious or is presented in complex ways. It's an ongoing effort to shed light on these pervasive yet often subtle forces.
Well, we've certainly peeled back quite a few layers today, exploring these intriguing, sometimes unsettling connections between occult practices, secrecy, and the levers of power. From ancient royal advisors all the way to modern political strategists, this idea of hidden knowledge and its influence seems to run right through human society.
It's truly fascinating how these practices, whether seen as strategic tools, genuine beliefs, or cultural inheritances, consistently highlight that enduring human quest. The quest for control, for meaning, and maybe for perceived edge in a very complex world. And it leaves us with a pretty important question, I think. In a world that claims to value transparency more and more, how much of our reality is still being shaped, perhaps profoundly, by forces that actually prefer to remain in the shadows?
Something for you to consider as you reflect on this deep dive. Thank you for joining us.